Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a little bit of context on climate change. The very first job I had in science, I was still an undergraduate, was as a lab rat standing in a freezer at 0 Fahrenheit, cutting up ice cores with a bandsaw. And the idea was that we wanted to make measurements of past temperatures and climates. These ice cores were drilled in Greenland and Antarctica, and locked in them was information on world temperatures over the last million years. While I was in the lab, a reporter from the Vashon Island Herald called, and he had a simple question. He lived on an island. He wondered if living on an island, should he be worried about this global warming stuff? I was kind of a snide SOB, so I replied, well, that depends. How long can you tread water? The reporter thought he had a great quote, got very excited. The problem is, of course, what I said was true. Now, you hear a lot of seemingly contradictory things about climate. CO2 is warming the globe. CO2 was both higher and lower in the past. We're in an ice age. The ice is melting. Sea level is rising. The Earth was a lot warmer and a lot colder in the past. Again, the problem is everything I just said is true. Thanks to the ice cores, we know that the climate over the last 500 million years very well. Right now, we are living in a geologically short, mild period of a major ice age. The world is now, even at this mild period, much colder than it has been for most of the last 500 million years. The last 3 million years has been an ice age dominated by long, very cold periods with short spurts of warming. During the last glacial peak, there was a mile of ice on Manhattan. Paris and London were Arctic tundra. There was solid winter ice down to the Carolinas. The ice sheets retreated, but not all the way. Only a bit over half of the ice actually melted. Greenland, Antarctica, many places in Canada, Alaska, and Russia are still in the grips of an ice age. If that ice melts, we will get 260 feet of sea level rise. That would be bad. Low-lying terrain, like all of Florida, becomes ocean. Coastal cities like Miami, Savannah, Charleston, Houston all drown. Atlanta and Dallas become seaports. Much of Northern Europe and the most populated parts of China and India become shallow seas. We've seen this before in the geologic record. These warm periods, when there's no glaciers, were driven by much higher levels of CO2, greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane have a huge impact on climate. Higher levels of CO2 translate into warmer temperatures, melting glaciers, and much higher sea levels. Now, our peak at warming was about 8,000 years ago. Since then, the natural climate cycle should have been causing glacial advances, but the ice is still retreating. This is where CO2 and methane come in. Greenhouse gases started changing when our ancestors invented agriculture and started clearing forests. Slash and burn agriculture and rice paddies are a great way to put CO2 and methane back into the atmosphere. This extra greenhouse gas from our ancestors stopped the climate from dropping back into an ice age, but this was a relatively small input of CO2. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution and fossil fuels, we get CO2 on steroids. Right now, we're adding over 32 billion tons of CO2 a year, mostly from oil, gas, and coal. That increases the CO2 content of the atmosphere by over 0.5% every year. Our problem today is really too much of a good thing. On one hand, it would be bad to crush Manhattan under a mile of ice. On the other hand, it would be bad to drown Manhattan in Miami. And it doesn't take that much water. On the plus side, it will take thousands of years to melt all the glaciers and decades before we see major sea level rise. On the downside, this is a huge problem that we're leaving to our children and grandchildren. They will see 3 to 6 feet of sea level rise this century. And human-caused warming is not a scientific controversy. Scientists know this is real. This is a political controversy. You can band-aid the problem. Miami Beach's solution is to raise the level of the streets by a couple of feet. This makes sidewalk cafes into sidewalk swimming pools during king tides. But the bottom line here is, do you like sea level where it is? Yes or no? We are doing this to ourselves. If you don't care about the world you're leaving your children, then we're done. No need to discuss further. If you do care, you actually need to act. So what do we do? I don't have any pat answers, but I'll throw out some thoughts. We can start by not making the problem worse. Burn less oil and gas. The big users of fossil fuels are electric power generation and transportation, mostly cars and trucks. We can get a lot more of our energy from solar, wind, and nuclear. We can limit fossil fuel use to those times when we can't get wind or sun. China and India can stop building coal-fired power plants. We can make it easier to buy and drive electric cars and vehicles. The average commute in the US is 32 miles round trip. That is way less than the capacity of electric cars. We can do a lot more in Florida. It's a sad joke that the Sunshine State is 44th in renewables. This state does almost nothing to develop, encourage, and use our abundant solar power. So, do you like sea level where it is? Like it or not, if we don't do something, there will be about 6 feet of sea level rise by 2100 and a lot more the next century. 6 feet means goodbye to significant portions of this state. So how long can you tread water?